So I'm just finished Netflix's live-action adaptation of One Piece. Now for me to properly explain my point of view, I think it's very important for all of you to know what perspective I'm coming from, and that is, some of my earliest memories of being alive are One Piece. Also, if the Netflix show is your first introduction to this series, don't worry, I cannot judge, as back in 2004, I got my start on the 4Kids dub. 4Kids dub was probably best known for its weird censorships and strange retelling of the story, such as Sanji not smoking, so he's always got a lollipop in his mouth, or anything being related to guns being renamed, and the guns themselves being turned into super soakers. One thing that absolutely stuck with me, though, is that the pirate rap still goes insanely hard for no good reason. I also played some of the video games growing up, but eventually, when the 4Kids show stopped airing, I just slowly kind of forgot about One Piece. But one day, I went into school, history class was talking about pirates, so I thought to myself, wait a second, didn't there used to be an anime about pirates? Maybe I should start looking into that again. Now, what my 11-year-old brain didn't know is that this nostalgic curiosity was going to become a lifelong obsession and passion. Now, obviously, because of the history I have with this show, my opinion on this new Netflix series is going to be gigantically impacted. Instead, I've asked my buddy Fruitman to go ahead and watch this show because he's never seen or heard of a One Piece before. So it'd be really interesting to see what someone from the other side thinks about this new Netflix series. Now, in order to start talking about this show, I think it's important to cover the main cast that we'll be talking about for the rest of this video. So, in order, we have Luffy, of course, the main character of the show. I think he's best described as an absolute goddamn meathead, both metaphorically and literally. He's eaten a devil fruit as a young child. His body is made out of rubber because of it, but also he lost his ability to swim. You see, it's called a devil fruit because it's like making a deal with the devil. His main goal is, of course, to find the One Piece, a legendary treasure that will make anybody who finds it known as the King of the Pirates. For the most part, Luffy is not the most intelligent character, but God, it would be hard not to love and care for this little dude. Next we have Zoro, the first crewmate Luffy picks up on his grand adventure, and probably the strongest and most loyal ally. Zoro's equipped with 3 katanas, wielding one in each hand, and finally wielding the last one in his mouth. I would also describe Zoro as a meathead character, but in a different way to Luffy. This guy's very stoic and edgy at times, but also very fun and goofy when nothing too serious is going on. Now, while this man for sure isn't the smartest man in the world, he is very well skilled in his art and wants to become the world's greatest swordsman due to a promise he made with a childhood friend. Now we have Nami. Now Nami, first and foremost, is a cat burglar. She's very money-driven, especially in these early arcs. I'm honestly not going to go very deep with her because, well, there's going to be plenty of time to go over her since the later half of the show is for the most part all about her history. So while we'll get back to Nami later, I think it's time to go over Usopp. Usopp is a coward and a liar, and his goals and aspirations revolve around the fact that he's honestly very weak and underwhelming compared to the rest of the main cast. I believe he's supposed to represent mostly just kind of like a dude, like a real guy. His goals and dreams are that he simply wants to be brave and strong, something he struggles with quite a bit. He wants to better himself and feel good about the growth he's made along his pirating journey. And finally, we have our favorite chivalrous chef of the sea, Sanji. He's a knack for the ladies and refuses to ever hurt any woman he may encounter. His way of fighting is interesting since he only uses his legs, but that's because he can't risk damaging his hands, because if he does, he'll be left with no way to cook. Sanji's main goal is to find the All Blue, a sea where every fish in the ocean meets up, so if need be, he could make up any kind of dish he wants. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, I think it's finally time to start talking about the show. So we start with Luffy first setting out on his adventure and immediately sinking his own ship. Now I think this is great because it shows that Luffy is not capable of traveling the sea on his own. He needs plenty of others with him to make up for his weaknesses. Now his first moment is him being brought aboard the pirate ship of Captain Alvida, where Luffy meets a scared little boy named Kobe. Kobe wants to leave and join the Marines because he wants to be able to protect those who can't protect themselves, but our stretchy boy doesn't really care for how much of a coward this kid is. Luffy on Alvida's ship is great because right out the gate, while it shows us what Luffy's powers are, it also showcases something else. The East Blue might be a sea with plenty of big fish to fry, but at the start of his journey, Luffy is already proving he's one of the biggest. We're shortly introduced to Zoro in this kind of interesting scene where he's being recruited for Baroque works by Mr. Seven. Now the reason this is interesting is because in the original series this doesn't happen at all. In the second saga of the show, Zoro does mention that he was asked to be a part of the organization, but beyond that we never really got anything about it. And I kinda like this as his introduction. It shows off how much of a badass he is and clears up what was otherwise kind of a mystery in the anime. But then we get into my first issue with the show. Now, I understand that this cannot be a one-to-one recreation of the show, but this scene just bugs me. The thing I'm talking about is the little girl offering Zoro rice balls in the show. Let me explain how the manga handled this scene. So at this point in the manga, we have only heard of Zoro as a pirate hunter and a demon. He's been crucified for multiple days when we first meet him, and then we see this little girl offer him rice balls when he's been starving to death for quite a while. Helmeppo catches the little girl in the act, stomps the rice balls into the dirt, and then throws her over the wall of the area where Zoro is being held. The scene is supposed to show that the demon we've heard of is actually very human and thankful of this girl's help. It's supposed to humanize him when the only thing that we've heard is that he's a bloodthirsty bounty hunter. The Netflix adaptation knows this scene is important, which is why they included it, but honestly, it just makes Zoro look like kind of a weirdo as he still eats the food off the floor for no reason at all. I know I said Zoro is a meathead, but he's not a moron. This is one of those scenes where I feel they should have just taken the extra time to make this scene properly, and if they didn't want to, then respectfully, they shouldn't have done it at all. Like I said, I had another person watch this show, and when I asked him about it, he said he didn't even remember it, really. It was very forgettable, whereas in the anime and manga, it is really high impact. I think I just legitimately would have preferred for it to not be here. Now to the most important part. Have you seen the Din Din Mushis in this? They're gigantic, a little nasty looking, but to be honest, I think I kinda like them. Other things of note, you get to see Helmeppo's whole ass. I don't know why, but honestly, I thought it was kind of funny, so here we are. Everything from here on out is pretty normal, except that Axan Morgan has the map to the Grand Line, but this doesn't change a whole lot for me. Moving on to the next island, we meet one of my personal favorite characters from the manga, and that is, of course, Buggy the Clown. Now, this whole section is completely different. Let me quick cover the manga real quick. A majority of the story is about how Luffy and Buggy perceive treasure in wildly different ways. Luffy considers any item that somebody holds dear to themselves can be treasure. For him, of course, it's his straw hat. However, for Buggy, on the other hand, treasure is strictly monetary. We are introduced to this little dog known as Shushu, whose only goal in life is to protect this pet food store that was owned by Shushu's owner. The owner left a long time ago because he was sick, promising his companion that he would return, and it was Shushu's job to guard the store until his master came back. Now, the treasure theme works great here because this pet food establishment is said to be this dog's treasure, but because Buggy doesn't see value in it, he sends his goons to go burn it down. After all is said and done, the only thing left was one more bag of pet food that Luffy hands over to Shushu, so he still has something left of what he held so dear. And because of this moment, Luffy's engagement with Buggy is a lot more personal, giving this fight between these two a lot more weight. Also, it's pretty obvious, but Luffy and Buggy are not only opposites in morals. They're also opposites physically. Luffy's rubber body makes him immune to any sort of bludgeoning damage, whereas Buggy's body is immune to any sort of slashing damage because of his Chop Chop fruit. It's because of this that the inevitable battle is exciting, but the live-action version does this entirely differently. Instead of dealing with the differences in Luffy and Buggy's morals in this version, the Straw Hats are kidnapped by Buggy as he's looking for their map of the Grand Line. Buggy is shown to have kidnapped what I can only assume is most of the town for his big circus act, forcing the townspeople to laugh and applaud on cue to fit the image he wants for himself, which is honestly really fitting because, as you learn later in the manga, Buggy is insanely fucking insecure. He has really big Joker vibes during this part, and while I think Buggy is visually appealing, I don't entirely love his demeanor in this depiction. But I'd be lying if I said I still didn't get a laugh out of this.
What did you just say? Just that everyone knows who you are.
We get a bit of talking between Zoro and Kabaji, where they continue to go on about Zoro's history as a bounty hunter, saying that he killed Kabaji's brother and hunted them down relentlessly for days. I don't hate trying to tie Zoro to Buggy's crew, specifically because, well, originally Zoro was planned to be a part of Buggy's crew instead of our main character's first mate. I think it's a little interesting to make Garp appear so early. For those of you who have only watched the Netflix version, you don't see this man until the end of Arc 5. Episode 314. My point is way later. But honestly, I don't think it affects too much to introduce Garp this early, but it is kind of an L that we see Kobe as often as we do. Helmeppo, on the other hand, is an absolute treat to see over and over again, because good lord, this man's haircut has never failed to make me smile. This shit is just so goofy and I love it. I'm honestly not gonna really talk about these three though, because generally they just aren't very interesting to me. And now we get to dock at Syrup Village. The Straw Hats are looking for an actual ship because, well, the one we currently have just isn't gonna cut it as far as the Grand Line goes. Here we run into our favorite warrior of the sea, Mr. Usopp, and honestly, this section of the show is perfectly fine. Kuro is still the same, and while the plan to kill Kaya is slightly altered, it still remains intact. But all in all, the Syrup Village section, I didn't think was too bad. There is one major change in it. They fucking killed Mary in this story. Yeah, in the original, Kuro does attempt to murder him, but he survives. And TBH, I don't really think whether Mary lives or dies really matters, so you know what? Fine. It's fine. Oh, and I almost forgot again. The Usopp pirates are not here. Usopp is supposed to have a small following of children that look up to him, but they get dropped. So did Django. I can live in a world where the Usopp pirates aren't here, but literally Django is the most memorable villain of this section, even more so than Captain Kuro. And he at the very least deserves to be mentioned. So now the Straw Hats leave with their newly acquired pirate ship, and as we approach the Baratie, I should let you know that I think this is the most heavily altered section of the show. First of all, the main antagonist, Don Krieg, does not make an appearance here whatsoever. We do see him get murdered, which is okay, fine. I'm gonna be completely honest. I know a lot of people love the Baratie, but I just don't remember it anywhere near as fondly as I do some of the other sections of the story. Maybe I should give it a reread, but the exclusion of Don Krieg didn't really have an impact on me here, so I think it'd be a little unfair to try and talk down on this section of the show. One thing, however, I was curious about, which version of Sanji's backstory were they going to use? For those of you who don't know, the anime does occasionally change some stuff due to it being too graphic, and this is one of the first cases of that. In the anime, Chef Zeph loses his leg because it gets caught on a chain while swimming or something, and he has to, I think, cut it off to escape, but they don't show him doing that. I could be getting that wrong, I'm going to be real, I don't think I remember. I have not watched this section in many years. The show actually uses the real story of how Chef Zeph lost his leg, which is that while he and Sanji were stranded on the island, he bashed it off with a rock so he could eat it to survive. So all I'm saying is while the Netflix show technically gets plenty of stuff wrong, I say technically because going into it, I knew it was going to be altered. It actually told the real story here while the anime didn't. But that's kind of where the similarities of this section end. Mihawk didn't chase Don Krieg back to the East Blue, he was hired by Garp. Which is a little silly, especially with some of the latest chapters coming out where we really get to see how insane Garp can be. All I'm saying is hiring this guy was probably a little unnecessary. Zoro gets his big fight with Mihawk as he does, and finally Luffy gets his first encounter with the main antagonist of the season, Arlong. That's right, Arlong officially shows up at the Baratie. I kind of understand why they show him so early, because when it comes to a show like this, I get wanting a little bit more time to set up the main antagonist. Then it's revealed that Nami has been a part of Arlong's crew the whole time. Luffy, of course, does not accept her leaving, and now with Sanji on board, we finally get into the climax of the show, Arlong Park. Now, this isn't really supposed to be a breakdown of the show, just some of my thoughts on it as someone who's been watching it once again since I was 6 years old. The main thing that I didn't care for in Arlong Park was Nami's sister Nojiko not being aware of what was going on with her the whole time, viewing her as a traitor to the town as opposed to seeing her as a sister. In the original when we're introduced to Nojiko, she already knows what's going on with Nami, so seeing her so cruel just didn't fully feel right. To make it quick, Nami joined Arlong's crew because they had made a deal. If she can collect 100 million berry, she could buy Cocoa Village back from him. Arlong, being who he is, of course doesn't honor this transaction and sends this mouse bastard to steal all the money she's collected over the years, leaving her back in the same situation she has been since she was a child. We get into one of the most impactful scenes of this first arc, with Luffy giving his hat that he holds so dear to himself to a struggling Nami as a way to show that he's here for her. As far as I can tell, this scene is shot for shot just like the original, and if you had to pick a scene to do that with, well, this one is it. Now, the rest of the show is mostly just fighting, so Luffy destroys Arlong Park, along with Arlong himself, and we end the show with what else but the iconic barrel scene. Oh yeah, and Smoker is foreshadowed for Season 2, if that ever happens. Which, seeing him at the end just reminded me. Okay, so after going over everything, I think it's pretty safe to say that overall I didn't really enjoy the show, but that doesn't mean it has zero value. Like I said, I had my buddy go watch it and he said overall he liked it. He said it was campy, it was goofy, and of course he didn't get frustrated at the lacking of certain scenes because he didn't fucking know they existed. And honestly, it all kind of worked out because he started reading the manga now, which is like the whole point of this existing to my knowledge. I think a good point to have is that even though they cut out a lot of sections, that doesn't mean that there is zero value here. It is still really important. But I think one final thing I have to say is, why isn't Gaimon in this? Where is Gaimon? I just want to say thank you to everybody who watched the show, and if you enjoyed the video, consider maybe leaving a like and subscribing. Now, I usually consider that cringy, but with just how this whole thing works, you kind of have to. But if I'm glad, thank you for watching, and keep an eye out for anything else I release.